Massive crimes by U.S. officials such as Fauci exposed in the NIH, NIAID. Guess what? They did fund gain of function. They lied about it. So did a whole lot of lying virologists from all around the world, just as I told you 4 years ago. But finally, it's coming out. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity. We are going to be talking about this today, that there are massive government crimes that have just been exposed. The question is, will anything happen as a consequence? First, let's go there and listen to this. This is the current director of the NIH. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Shifting to some questions regarding NIH's document retention policies. Dr. David Moran's, a senior advisor to Dr. Fauci for decades, wrote in an email to Dr. Daszak, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I am FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we are all safe. Plus, I deleted most of those earlier emails after sending them to Gmail," end quote. Is that consistent with NIH document retention policies?
It is not.
Does the NIH FOIA office teach employees how to avoid transparency?
I certainly hope not.
He also later wrote Dr. Daszak, and I quote, "We are all smart enough to know to never have smoking guns, and if we did, we wouldn't put them in emails. And if we found them, we would delete them," end quote. Is that consistent with NIH document retention policies?
It is not.
Finally, emails show that Dr. Moran's would share internal discussions regarding upcoming FOIA releases with Dr. Daszak. He would then help Dr. Daszak craft responses to documents being released in these FOIAs. Are those actions consistent with NIH policies?
If those actions occurred, they would not be consistent. No.
So do these actions concern you, Dr. Tabak?
It does indeed.
What is Dr. Moran's current employment status?
He is an employee of NIH.
What is this whole, like, I got to teach this guy how to use a microphone, right? Like, he's like, oh, okay. Like, dude, you're a human being. You can bring the microphone towards you. You can just bring that towards you. It's one of the most amazing things. You can actually do that. So just never trust a guy who can't work his own microphone. Okay, second, the FOIA lady taught me how to hide my emails and make sure they didn't show up in a FOIA request, even after a FOIA request had been initiated, and he's talking about it with other people. Hey, this breaks laws. So I'm glad you're asking the questions, but don't ask this guy, I'm sure, are you at all concerned by this? Not concerned. It's like, hey, how come this guy isn't in jail already? Have you referred this to the Department of Justice? When you find out about blatant criminality inside your organization, what do you typically do, Dr. Tabak? Right? That would be appropriate questioning because crimes got committed. But because I have this magic thing called an internet connection, I'm going to help these guys out because that's what I am. I'm a helpful guy. So let's start here. By the way, this is David Moran's right here, and it's probably going to be, his last name is going to be synonymous with Mudd, if you don't know. Mudd was the doctor who treated John Wilkes Booth after he jumped out and broke his leg, and the doctor didn't know that he was a shot Lincoln, but forever after, it's like, your name is Mudd, M-U-D-D, right? Hey, you moron, you morons. Look at these morons, right? This guy, what a nut. Openly talking about how he's violating the law in order to skirt stuff so that they can continue to hide from the American public and from the world the involvement of the NIH and other virologists who got NIH money in the whole process of creating this particular virus. So let me help you guys out. And by the way, there he is in full bureaucratic sort of view. That's what he looks like. First, obstruction of justice. That's what we've got here. What is obstruction of justice? Deliberately destroying records to prevent them from being disclosed during an investigation or legal proceeding that can be considered an obstruction of justice. This crime involves any act that corruptly impedes or interferes with the administration of law. Which laws? Say this law, 18 U.S. Code Section 1519 pertaining to Title 18 here, destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in federal investigations and bankruptcy. Quote, whoever knowingly alters, destroys, mutilates, conceals, covers up, falsifies, or makes a false entry in any record, document, or tangible object with the intent to impede, obstruct, or influence the investigation or proper administration of any matter within the jurisdiction of any department or agency of the United States or any case filed under Title 11 or in relation to or contemplation of any such matter or case shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. 20 years is kind of a felony, all right? That's a big number right there. False destruction of records. Did that happen here? Yep, 100%. 100%. How about number 3, violation of FOIA regulations, which itself mandates, FOIA mandates, that agencies maintain and preserve records. Intentionally deleting emails to avoid compliance with FOIA requests would be a violation of these regulations and could lead to administrative penalties or other legal consequences. So there. Does that help anybody out there? We have 3 crimes I've identified. Not enough? All right, let's go to crime number 4, conspiracy. What if multiple individuals are involved? Well, if they are involved in a coordinated effort to delete emails or cover up records, they could all be charged with conspiracy. This crime involves an agreement between 2 or more persons to commit a criminal act along with at least one overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Well, I got one more for you. How about this one? Federal Records Act requires federal agencies to preserve all records that document the organization, functions, policies, decisions, procedures, and essential transactions of the agency. Intentionally destroying records in violation of this act can lead to criminal charges. Criminal, okay? And by the way, you can find out great summaries of this from the U.S. Right to Know. They deserve several Pulitzer Prizes, especially Emily Koop, for all of the work FOIAing the stuff out, chasing the emails, being on this whole lab leak thing, and really being a thorn in the side of the NIH and all of these co-conspirators here, especially David Morenz. And so this is a great article. There's the link down there if you want to follow that. Now, this is what some of these emails looked like. And here, this is an email from David Morenz up there. Let me get my little highlighter tool out here so we can, you know what, I'll laser point it. That's what we'll do. It's up here. It's from David Morenz. It's going to Peter Daszak. More about him a little later coming up. And then going to other people like Christian Anderson, Eddie Holmes, and so on. All these, basic co-conspirators here. He wrote, Peter and colleagues, as you know, I try to always communicate on Gmail because my NIH email is FOIA'd constantly. Get it? Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna write on my NIH email in a thing that can get FOIA'd about how I usually write off a Gmail so I can't get FOIA'd. Smart. Yesterday, my Gmail was hacked, probably by these GOF a-holes, and until IT can get it fixed, I may have to occasionally email from my NIH account, like now. IT spent a couple hours today, but couldn't fix it. Stuff went to my Gmail, gets to my phone, but not my NIH computer. Just so you know, don't worry. Just send to any of my addresses, and I will delete anything I don't want to see in the New York Times. David Morenz, MD. All these people on here are now co-conspirators. Why? Because they were aware of the fact that getting stuff to skirt and specifically evade the FOIA laws is a no-no, and that they were therefore engaging with at least one overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So I think they had all that conspiracy stuff going on there. So these people, though, these are awful, awful people. And just how bad is it? Well, let's turn now to this clip with 2 things you're going to see here. One is Rand Paul grilling Anthony Fauci in July of 2021. That's the top clip. The bottom clip is from a hearing that just came out in May of 2024, asking the new director of the NIH about gain of function. So let's listen in.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute.
Do they fund
of
Dr.
Virology.
Barrick?
Dr. Tabak, Did NIH fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology through EcoHealth?
It depends on your definition of gain-of-function research. If you're speaking about the generic term, yes, we did.
Yes, we did. Okay, that first one was from July of 2021. Rand Paul, senator, attempting to get this out of Fauci many times. Fauci, we never did any gain-of-function research. And then you see this little weasel wording down here by this horrible Tabak guy. I mean, I know he looks like he's playing off like he's your grandpa, and he's confused over there in the juice aisle at Safeway, but he's not. He's actually much more deadly than that. But he's got a good shtick, I see, and he pretends to be sort of bumbly, and he can't find a shirt that fits and all that stuff. His tie is always off to the side, but it's all an act. The guy knows exactly what he's up to. But he's like, oh yeah, it depends what you mean. Like, what we mean is gain of function, which is a very simple thing, which means, are you taking live organisms and manipulating them in a way that would make them more pathogenic, meaning more transmissible or more deadly to humans? That's it. A pathogen that has pandemic potential. That's something that communicates easily. Gain of function is working on one of those pandemic potential viruses or bacteria and giving them new genetic tricks so they are either more transmissible or more deadly. That's it. That's gain of function. That's what it is. There's no such thing as generic gain of function. Oh, you mean like generic gain of function? It's happening everywhere. I think I was just down at the library and they were conducting a gain of function experiment, demonstration for the kids. Like, no, that's not it. So yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, that the NIH and NIAID under Fauci were contributing to funding and otherwise supporting the creation of a virus that ended up killing millions and millions of people. How about this? Hey, all you people who put all your faith in Fauci, I understand it's tough when you put all your faith in a human. That's just bad deal. Don't do that again next time. I'm sure you're smarting from that, and it probably feels a little painful. I just wonder how many trash cans now have Fauci T-shirts, candles, and posters in them today going out with the trash. Probably a lot. All right. So, yes, they did fund this gain of function research. We now know that. That is now a matter of established fact. It is in the congressional record. Okay. Hey, New York Post is writing up here, sick lies after years of falsehood. Health official admits finally that U.S. funded dangerous virus research at China's COVID lab. Okay. So with all of that, then this is the common knowledge alert. This is coming up to actual common knowledge now, meaning that everybody knows that everybody knows. Soon, first it was like, oh, you're crazy to think it came from a lab at all. Then, well, it might have come from a lab, but we didn't fund it. And then, well, okay, we did fund it, but it was sort of generic gain of function. This is called trickle truthing, and it's going to get us eventually to common knowledge, which is the United States and its various virological allies around the world were up to their literal and metaphorical eyebrows, funding and transferring the technology so that China could create a more pathogenic SARS-CoV-2 virus. And by the way, that stuff's going on all over the place with H1N5 right now. And you know that happened with the anthrax that was actually used during 9/11, was mailed around in all the envelopes and went to Senate offices and other places. That actually came out of a U.S. military lab. So we know there's plenty of this stuff going on, right? But the fact that they just lied about it, bald-faced lied about it, there's no gain of function going on here. Of course there was. And we all knew it. And we all knew it was just bald-faced lies. We all knew it, except for the people who bought the Fauci candles. They got a little caught short on that one. But every single one of these people should be investigated. Let me help everybody out. Looks like I got a few names cut off on that list because I didn't put that up right. But everybody in the office of director there, Hugh Auchincloss, Sherry DePolar, Jill Harper, Clifford Lane, Kimberly Barash there, Patricia Conrad, Sharon Giles, David Morenz, obviously, and Ian Simon. All of you, all y'all need to be investigated, including all these other folks here, which is Christian Anderson, you can't see there, and I did put Anthony Fauci into that, of course. Hugh Auchincloss shows up again, but David Morenz there you see again. But Patrick Valence, Christian Drosten, Marian Koopman, Ron Fauchier, Duchier Fauchier, Andrew Rambeau, Paul Schreier, Andrew Rasmussen, of course, Francis Collins, Peter Hotez, Ian Lipkin, Eddie Holmes, Peter Daszak, Bob Gary, and about 100 more just off the top of my head. These were all the people who were involved in trying and conspiring to muddy the waters and deflect people away from looking at the lab origin of this virus. Why? For the stupidest, grubbiest reason you can imagine. For their own sake of their own jobs. Look, they put their careers into manufacturing and manipulating viruses. And if it came out that this thing was made in a lab and it got out, you know what? There could be budget cuts. And, maybe I'll have to fire half my lab staff. Or maybe my lab can't even get funding for this kind of dangerous, stupid research that has never yet delivered us any useful insights into anything, but has contributed to a number of accidental releases of bad stuff out into the environment. And probably Disease X Disease X ain't coming from nature, folks. We all know that, right? Disease X is coming from somebody on this list, probably, or somebody I haven't listed yet, but it's a list like this. These are the people who want to create viruses, chimeric viruses, and unleash them on you. Now, now you can see it more clearly because I put it over here. Yeah, every one of these folks, everyone and some more besides. Now, way back in the day in 2020, 4 years ago now, May 4th, 2020, I put out this episode called Lying Virologists and Self-Inflicted Wounds. And in there, I noted that Newsweek had come up with this bombshell report there. And it was pretty amazing because they said, wow, Anthony Fauci, advisor to President Donald Trump, who, by the way, did a terrible job with the vaccine, the jab, locking us down, all of that. Never forget that. And something of an American folk hero for his steady, calm leadership during the pandemic crisis. At least one poll shows Americans trust Fauci more than Trump on the coronavirus pandemic. And few scientists are portrayed on TV by Brad Pitt. Oh, how nice. But just last year, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, that's the NIAID, the organization led by Fauci, funded scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other institutions on gain-of-function research on bad coronaviruses. So this is known, right? And look, the NIAID had committed $3.7 million over 6 years. That's just to some of the gain-of-function work. We saw the State Department, USAID, which is the CIA front, throwing hundreds of millions of dollars, we think, at least over 120 million. The DOD, State Department, USAID, plus NIAID, all throwing money into this kind of work, just going to one organization. That would have been EcoHealth Alliance, led by Peter Daszak. So we saw this. Look at this. This is in 2020, right? We know this way back there in early 2020. And in that report, I said, look, it's pretty clear. These are the genetic sequences of 3 different types of coronaviruses, one coming from pangolin on the top. The next one, they said, oh, it's very close to rat TG13. And then, of course, SARS-CoV-2, which differs from every other thing that we've seen in anywhere in any of its clades because it has this mysterious PRRA furin cleavage site inserted in there. It's an insert. It's not like, well, a few things got modified and all that. This is an insert, folks. It's not a mutation. It's an insert. Inserts are hard to come by, except in a lab. Very easy to come by in a lab. And, of course, we had this proximal origin paper here. Lead author Christian Anderson, Andrew Rambeau on there, Ian Lipkin, of course, Eddie Holmes, and Bob Gary. Those are your lead authors. Of course, there were more people contributing to this behind the scenes, as I revealed at the time, Farrar and Fauci and all these other folks. And even they, though, had to put down that polybasic furin cleavage site down there. And look, they tried to line it up with all these other sort of things that might have come from this SARS-CoV-2, and it doesn't line up with any of them. And they're like, case closed. It was natural origin. It's like, worst piece of science ever. By the way, Nature Medicine, you have 2 black eyes and you're on your knees at this point. This is just terrible. You got to retract this. This is one of the worst travesties of science and science reporting ever done. And that's a pretty high bar. There's a lot of bad stuff that's come out in your journal, but this one, I think in the scheme of things, it's probably right up there amongst the worst because we had simple stuff like this. Remember, Tom, this is a big genetic wheel over here, and SARS-CoV-2 is that pink, a wedge that heads out that way. And you can see that it's surrounded by a sea of yellow, which means it has no nearby relatives that happen to have that feature. That would be like you get a child born in a hospital and they have a big long monkey tail, and you look at the genetic chart and you go, we got to go back pretty far to get a prehensile monkey tail out of this thing. Like, oh, well, according to the natural origin, Christian Anderson, all those people, it could have happened. It could have happened. Yeah, but it doesn't. And it doesn't work that way. And everybody involved who's a scientist knows that. This was just, it offended me at the time because it was so terrible. Now, speaking of being offended, Peter Hotez writing here in, again, U.S. Right to Know, great article here. This came back, when was this? This was probably a 2022 article, maybe? I think so. Writing here, they said, quote, Peter Hotez, Dean of the Baylor College of Medicine, National School of Tropical Medicine. Baylor, not a good look. You got to get rid of this guy. Has been a fierce critic of potential hearings next year into a possible lab origin of COVID-19. Fierce critic. No, why would we ever look into something? That science is not looking into things I don't want you to look into. And whether the NIH prematurely discredited the hypothesis. Well, I'll show you premature. 8 days. Is that premature enough? I'll show you what that means in a second. So Hotez decried the hearings as nothing less than a plan to undermine the fabric of science in America. The fabric of science. As if there is such a thing. And by the way, Peter, even if you were wrapped tightly, swaddled up in science, you would still not be able to detect its fabric. You have no relationship to it. What an awful, odious human being this guy is. Hotez also dismissed as an outlandish conspiracy the possibility that a lab accident sparked the COVID-19 pandemic. Outlandish. It's an outlandish conspiracy, I tell you. However, they go on to note in this awesome article, Hotez's own 2012 to 2017 NIH grant for the development of a SARS vaccine had the stated aim of responding to any accidental release from a laboratory. Oh, what a quinky dink. In addition to a possible zoonotic spillover of the virus, the $6.1 million NIH grant also raises the possibility of deliberate spreading of the virus by a bioterrorist attack. So intentional, accidental lab, all possibilities to him back in 2012 to 2017 when he needed millions of dollars to create a coronavirus vaccine, a SARS vaccine, right? And it's not clear, they write down here, why Hotez has dismissed a possible lab release of SARS-CoV-2 as a preposterous thing after having conducted research for years to prepare for just that very thing. Hotez did not reply to emailed questions. This is Peter Hotez. There he is. That's one of the nicest, most flattering shots I could get of this guy. And just writing on May 15th, Philip Marcolin writing the treatment of EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak by politicians is abhorrent and chilling. And Peter Hotez said the same thing. And they're all crying. All these people who for years have been gaslighting us, lying to us, and or creating a perversion of both justice and science. These two. They're like a Mean Girls club. I got, first off, I'm blocked by every one of them. So is everybody who asks any question, no matter how reasonable. They circle their little wagons and then they all talk to each other. What a terrible travesty of justice is that anybody dares to question why their own words should be used against them in their own grant applications, in their own science, and their own logic, and their own everythings. It's a terrible thing. And so I think the crimes, their lies, they're all here for everybody to see. Remember, all we have to do is use our eyes and we can see these things. The same article from U.S. Right to Know, quote, the project was helmed by Shengli Shi. Oh, no, the Bat Lady? You don't say. A senior scientist and virus hunter at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, nicknamed the Bat Lady, as part of his NIH grant, Hotez subcontracted funding for research on combined or chimeric coronavirus. Oh, is that where you take a piece from one and a piece from another and see how they work together? In fact, this kind of work had been going on for years and years and years. In fact, this was such a normal thing that everybody proposed it in their grants. It was in the Defuse grant, the Predict grant, Hotez's grant, all kinds of work that Ralph Barrick was doing. This was standard fare. They've been doing this stuff for years, and everybody in the virological community knew it, except for this guy, apparently. Somehow Michael Ulsterholm totally lost the thread when he was on the Joe Rogan Experience on March 10th of 2020, back when we could have used some guidance from some of the preeminent virologists. Instead, he's out there throwing smoke signals into the air to confuse everything, saying, I mean, look, we could not have crafted a virus like this to do what it's doing. I mean, we don't have the creative imagination or skill set. Except even I knew that we did. Even I knew about serial passaging in cell cultures and in animal models, Michael. Even I was able to crack open using my trusty Comcast connection. I just Google it up and find out that this kind of chimeric work had been happening for a very long time. We don't have to craft something line by line, letter by letter. You just take a big piece from one, a big piece from another, slap them together, start throwing them into your animal models, and eventually one of those permutations hits, and you amplify that, and you jiggle it up, and you keep going. And that's what these people have been doing. So, good news. It turns out that the Department of HHS has terminated all the funding, at least from the U.S. government, for EcoHealth Alliance. Yay! Too little, too late, but I'll take it. It's sort of a win. They say here, on behalf of the United States Department of HHS, I have suspended and proposed for debarment EcoHealth Alliance from participating in United States federal government procurement and non-procurement programs. This is the guy, Peter Daszak. He honestly belongs in prison. And I'm being generous with that assessment. So do a lot of other people. The scrambling has begun, of course. Peter Hotez writing, "Oh no, debarment is both unjust and jeopardizes our nation's biosecurity." No, Hotez. Our nation's biosecurity got absolutely crushed and undermined by sloppy, lazy, at best, that's the best I can be, sloppy, lazy work by the people you work with, okay, and defend. And then Stuart Neal also like, oh no, he's awful. This little club here doesn't have that many names in it. Now remember, Fauci's emails, I revealed this back in, that's June 2021, when we finally got a FOIA release of these emails. We saw that Christian Anderson, there he is down below me. You see him over there on the side. It's from Christian to Anthony Fauci and Jeremy Farrar. Now, you were a private virologist back in, this is on January 31st, 2020. He's writing this email, all right? And 10:32 at night. And he's writing it, and he's like, who do I need to talk to about this? Oh, I know. Anthony Fauci, I'll email him directly, which means they've already been in communication prior. And Jeremy Farrar, who at the time is head of the Wellcome Trust, which is a NGO operating out of the UK. So that's clearly the dream team of people you want to be talking to when you have concerns such as he wrote down here, which is the unusual features of the virus make up a really small part of the genome, just under 0.1%. That's the furin cleavage sites, just 4 amino acids, right? But, what a 0.1% it was, right? So one has to look really closely at all the sequences to see that some of the features potentially look engineered. And of course, he would know that because he's an actual virologist. He would know that just as I can and you can by looking at that weird alignment of that PRA furin cleavage site insert, not mutation, insert in there. As well, we saw this come out on February 1st, just the next day, or maybe even just later that night, because this is at the middle of the night. And this is from Anthony Fauci writing important, all caps, to Hugh Auchincloss, his number 2 at NIAID. And it's titled Barrick, that's Ralph Barrick and She, the Bat Lady, et al., Nature Medicine, SARS Gain of Function. Hugh, it is essential that we speak this morning. Keep your cell phone on. I have a conference, blah, 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 blah. I will forward you now. Today, you will have tasks today that must be done. That's the guy down there, okay? There he is. It was probably this paper he was worried about. Barrick and She on this particular paper right here from 2015. A SARS-like cluster of circulating bat coronaviruses shows potential for human emergence. Why would it show potential for human emergence? Well, because what they did was they created, look at that, they're creating chimeric SARS-like COVs, and they cultured them in Vero E6 cells from the United States Army Medical Research Center. So she, the Bat Lady, is using cells from the United States Army Medical Research Institute? Okay, okay. And, human airway epithelial cells. Oh, no, they're actually using human epithelial airway cells. So they're actually, they're creating chimeric viruses to see if they can get them to infect human lung tissue. Wouldn't you know it? Somebody's a little concerned about this. Important. Oh, no, they're scrambling. The first thing that Fauci does is not come out into the world and say, look, we're very sorry. There's a chance this came out of a lab. Here's everything we know about it. We're going to bring out Ralph Barrick because there's strong probability there's going to be myocarditis as a component of this because Ralph has been studying the effect of coronaviruses on rabbit myocarditis models since the mid-90s. He knows more than anybody else in the world. And if this does have the PRA furin cleavage site, there are basic inhibitors for that we could begin to explore. And by the way, we'll do everything we possibly can. Any other repurposed drug that might work, this is what we got to do. That this escaped is a real tragedy. We'll look into that and we'll hold people accountable. But for now, we have a lab escape and we have to do what we have to do in order to get this contained. Nope. First thing, we got to cover this up, right? And that's exactly what happened. So the NIH knew about all these studies and it approved this particular study, this one, Barrick and She, 2015, creating SARS chimeric viruses that can infect human epithelial cells. That one. Yeah, I went down and look at this. These studies were initiated before the U.S. government put a pause on gain of function research. So yeah, we got grandfathered in. And by the way, they were actually promoted and funded by the NIH. So, okay. All right. Carrying on. This is another one of those participants in the lab origin meeting. Just connect a dot for you. This is Jeremy Farrar. You can see his name all through these emails back in the day, helping to cover it up. But you might be interested to know that since stepping down as director of the Wellcome Trust to become, he's chief scientist at the WHO now. Oh, very good. Oh, that's good. Good place. Good place for a cover-up artist to go. This is just, you feeling how these threads are beginning to knit together? I hope so. And by the way, Jeremy Farrar at the time retweeting a piece written by Hotez. So the co-conspirators, they all retweet each other's nonsense. That's what's been happening here. Ignore the conspiracy theory. Scientists know COVID-19 wasn't created in a lab. As always, worth reading, Peter Daszak. That's just, this is just, anyway, whatever. So the cover-up timeline was pretty easy to spot here. Christian Anderson, he sent an email to Fauci, the earliest one we know about, because they didn't get this one scrubbed from FOIA quick enough. January 31st, 2020 at 10:32 in the night. Fauci then sends an email to Alkenkloss a couple hours after that on February 1st, 2021, and then emails fly around all that next Saturday. Lots of people copied in from the Wellcome Trust, from the NIH, the WHO, and friendly external researchers. But you know what? No NIH scientists. This was all done from Fauci and external bodies, people who he could presumably control better or had a more friendly relationship with because they were all up to their same eyeballs in the same conspiracy. And then a con call was arranged at 2 o'clock on that Saturday. It lasts for at least 56 minutes, we knew. Key leadership of all the Wellcome Trust and the NIH and the NIAID were on there, and they stay on afterwards to discuss something. 8 days later, 8 days after that call, 8 days, the full manuscript proving that this thing came from a natural origin was in draft form and on a preprint server. 8 days. That's all it took. Science. So what are my conclusions here today? First, SARS-CoV-2 came from a lab. We know this now for certain. Of course, I knew that 4 years ago, and so did you if you were following me. And we know that the U.S. government, through the NIAID, funded at least some of that research, and so did some other government bodies, which have not yet been really publicly, openly named, but I'll throw them out here now. The DOD, the State Department, and USAID. Next, we know that Ralph Baric spread the know-how necessary to actually conduct this kind of research. He is the master of coronaviruses and chimeric coronaviruses and something called no-seum genetic manipulation, meaning you can do these genetic manipulations in a way that you can't detect after the fact. Of course, there were some subtle ways, and we saw Alex Washburn really tear that apart, looking at what are called the restriction sites in that coronavirus. We can see the genetic fingerprints now. This thing it came from a lab. No question. Case closed. That's a done deal. Which lab? Don't know yet. Virologists across the globe immediately teamed up to derail any inquiry into the lab origin possibilities. We can begin to guess why. Money, power, fame, loss of reputation, whatever they feared or wanted, that was what was driving their behaviors. But you know what wasn't driving their behaviors? Concern for people, concern for making the world a better place, which means that when they come out and say, we need to keep doing our gain of function research because we're just trying to create good vaccines. Like, what you're trying to tell me is that what motivates you to do your research is helping people. I don't buy it. How could I? You don't care about people. Full stop. You did everything you could to not help people. So I'm not buying I'm just trying to help. Little song and dance right now. You're not. You're evil, nasty people. Okay? Science journals all conspired to promote the falsehood of natural origin. That would be the big ones, right? Nature Medicine, The Lancet, etc. They will never get back on my good graces until, I don't know if they ever could. It's very corrupt, very, very bad. Finally, somehow the vaccines were instantly ready to be tested. Where did those come from? Nobody was anticipating this. Nobody could have expected planes flying into buildings, right? You get these stories like, it caught us all by surprise. But we happen to have the Patriot Act ready. We had this mRNA vaccine just lying around. That's just how these things tend to go in these stories. In other words, all of COVID was a state-sponsored enterprise from beginning to end. Its origin, the cover-up, all of the so-called responses, the printing of money, the cramming of, the creating of this misinformation, disinformation, censorship complex, the vaccine, all of it. This wasn't some people doing the best they could with bad information and they made a few stumbles. This whole thing, this was a made-for-TV special. This was planned, practiced, and delivered. And that's a really important thing to know. By the way, just how extensive is the scientific grift and fraud in this story? This is Peter Daszak saying, great photo, which was tweeted out by Professor Michael Mann, he of climate change fame in the hockey stick chart, said, very much enjoyed our panel discussion this morning, and he's there with Tony Fauci and Peter Hotez. Is all of science just now, like, can we trust none of it? Maybe. So part 2 of this for my subscribers, we're going to, what are we up against exactly? And we got to talk about the deceptions and that thing down there. This is no longer easily explainable by anything other, or as well as anything other than evil. So we're up against evil, folks. I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about what we can do about it. That's what we're going to do back at Peak Prosperity. Please come by Peak Prosperity if you want to hang out with people who talk about these sorts of things. And believe me, we're a happier bunch than you might think, because at least we're in charge. We know what's happening out there. We feel in control of our own information flow. We decide what's important, and we make up our own minds because we believe our lying eyes and our distruthful ears, every time. All right, that's it. Thanks very much for listening for now. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.